Welcome to the Passivhaus podcast, brought to you by Passivhaus Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passivhaus, check out passivhausaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passivhaus journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction tech or weekly global Passivhaus showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passivhaus podcast. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Passivhaus podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh. I'm coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zack Semke in Seattle, Washington.
And it's been a little while, Zack, because we headed into season 2 last week with Mary and Ilka, but welcome back.
Yeah, it's great to be back. Thank you. I had a nice time away in August, but I've missed you. So it's good to rekindle these conversations.
I miss you too. And things have changed a little bit, mixed things up a little bit at the accelerator.
Yeah, we've launched the new version of the Happy Hour, which is now called the Global Passivhaus Showcase, and that's been going well so far. We're 2 weeks in as we record this, and once a month we're doing a special edition of that showcase that runs at a time that's friendly to the UK and to Europe. And it actually still works, I think, for New Zealand, because I think it's just in the morning for you guys. I think it's pretty tough for Australia and much further that direction. But we just did our first one with Anne-Marie Fallon of the really exciting firm Archetype. And she talked about Passivhaus schools. So it was good to get that going. I think all of us are mixed up by like where COVID is going and how to navigate that. And the international conference, as people know, has gone online only, which I think, makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, it's, you got to just be resilient and roll with it, I guess. How about you're in lockdown, yeah?
Yeah, we're in the midst of it. I've been working from home for the last 4 weeks. Kids have been at home, and we're in the middle of pretty much as the tighter lockdown as we ever get here in New Zealand, which is pretty full on. But yeah, we're soldiering on, and I think it still keeps home and health at top of mind for people. A lot of people talking about ventilation. A lot of people talking about the space, the healthiness of the spaces that they're in. So that's all stuff that we can help with here at the accelerator.
Yeah,
and that resilience as well. Not just within people's homes and buildings, but also just the wider context of resilience is top of mind for a lot of people right now.
Definitely, I have some thoughts to share about that, but maybe we can wait until after the interview before.
All right. Well, let's get into it. It's good that you mentioned Europe, because we're going back there this week to an interview with one of the leaders of Passivhaus in that part of the world from the UK. But before we do that, we got some people to thank for the Passivhaus podcast.
We sure do. Yeah, everything we do at the Accelerator comes thanks to support from our sponsors. So I want to give a big shout out to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxtingui Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minotaur All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Hartel, RDH Building Science, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsor is SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So big thank you to our sponsors.
Well, this week, as I said, we got a great interview from a great guest, Mark Siddall. Mark is an architect, and he's the founder and director of a low energy architecture firm called LEAP, which I love the name. It stands for Lovingly Engineered Architectural Process. That's LEAP. You can find him at leap.it. So LEAP for it. There's this little play on words there. Mark is a very passionate architect and he's passionate about enabling people to create healthier and happier lives by creating beautiful and quality assured ultra low energy homes and also workplaces and communities. He works across the spectrum. He's got a testimonial by none other than Professor Wolfgang Feist himself, the creator of Passivhaus Standard. And Wolfgang said of Mark that he's one of the pioneers to introduce Passivhaus to the UK. His experience and ongoing research into building performance makes Mark one of UK's most skilled and knowledgeable Passivhaus architects, which is true. I remember when I was doing my Passivhaus course that I actually used some of Mark's resources that he makes available. He's got some fantastic stuff on his website there. So here he is. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mark Siddall. Yep. Awesome. Hey, well, thank you, Mark, for joining us on the Passivhaus podcast. It's great to have you representing the UK and to chat with people doing some really important work over that side of the world. So let's start out with a bit of background, because you've been in this space for quite some time. So what's your background?
What's my background? It's I suppose my background is broad and varied. I grew up on building sites. I was a labourer for a while. I was a cost estimator. I was an architectural technologist before becoming an architect, and then became a certified Passivhaus designer 10 to 12 years ago now.
Yeah. It'd been around for a little while still. What was the Passivhaus scene like in the UK when you embarked on Passivhaus training?
Well, when I first started finding out about Passivhaus, there were no passive houses and there were no certifiers.
Wow.
I was translating things using Google Translate from German. That's 2006 for you.
So you were learning building science and trying to decipher German at the same time.
Yeah, I was teaching myself building physics, and some of the stuff that I did do along that line was I started looking for international best practice, and I actually found some really good books from Canada in 1979 and some other books from Sweden in 1977 that were really pivotal in terms of explaining how airtightness could be designed in practice. So yeah, I did a bit of a global sweep, and I generally say that I bought a time traveling device and kind of went through lots of different eras of research to try and piece together how it all worked, because the information wasn't there at the time.
And
now, of course, you can go on a course.
Yeah,
with Passivhaus training.
You jump on a Zoom call with someone on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
At that time, had you come across things like airtightness or high performance building physics? Was that included in any of your architectural training?
Not really, no. I mean, I knew a little bit of building science from my days you're trained to become an architect and as an architectural technologist, but I was very rusty and had to teach myself a lot from scratch. So yeah, I think it was a case of starting again. And airtightness was a new thing in the UK. When I started in practice as an architect around about 2000, that's when airtightness became something that moved into the building regulations in the UK. But it was, the target hasn't changed in all those years, but it's not exactly a challenging target of 10. So yeah, there's a huge difference between that and Passivhaus.
Yeah, but you could argue that that's still 2 decades ahead of where we are, which doesn't even have any recognition of airtightness in the building.
Well, that may be the case, but
And so was that a bit of a change? Do you remember that being something that the industry struggled with or rejected?
I think it was something that people were certainly struggling with and still struggle with in certain quarters. And thermal bridging was another big one. I can remember that seemed crazy to be thinking about thermal bridges and all this heat loss. No way can these junctions account for all of this heat loss that people were talking about. And then of course Passivhaus came along and redefined all of our thinking about that.
Yeah. And jumping forward to today, how would you rate where things are in terms of just the standard building code in the UK?
How would I rate it? I don't know that I would rate it. By on average, I think that we've got, there's a long way to go. There's huge building performance problems, performance gaps that have been identified in the UK construction industry. Passivhaus has been proven to close those gaps, and I've had the privilege of working with Professor David Johnston from Leeds Beckett University, and he's examined some of the projects I've worked on, and we've co-authored papers with Wolfgang Feist and others, demonstrating how Passivhaus closes that gap. But purely coming from an evidence-based approach. If it didn't work, it didn't work, and that would have been the conclusion as well.
Yeah. But you do, I mean, the building code in the UK, there is some more, it's getting more stringent in terms of energy efficiency, isn't it? And there are air tightness requirements. You have to have an energy performance certificate. So there is some recognition of the importance of energy, but also now carbon.
Yeah, there are recognitions, but what are they pushing in the right direction necessarily? There's a lot of discussion about net zero. Well, what is net zero, and is net zero even a reasonable target for buildings?
Right.
Is that net zero Britain? I get net zero buildings. There's a lot of issues associated with that, and if you don't draw the boundary conditions in the right kind of way, it's turned into game playing, and that's not what we should be doing.
So still quite a big gap between what would be legal to build by the regulations and Passivhaus if you were building a new house now and anywhere in the UK.
Yeah. Not just in terms of thermal performance, but also in terms of air quality. There was a great meta study that was done, funded by the UK government, and if you dig down like I have, and you actually pull the report apart and break down the statistics inside it, then you find out that over 75% of UK dwellings do not have adequate ventilation. They fail Part F of the building regulations, whereas Passivhaus, on the other hand, is the majority of the projects do satisfy those criteria. And this goes back to the time when, at the beginning of Passivhaus being introduced to the UK, there were maybe people had designed to address the Passivhaus standard, but hadn't necessarily ticked boxes for building regulations at the same time. So there's a few gaps that the study flagged up, but it's chalk and cheese. Passivhaus was delivering the air quality that was expected by and large.
So is that measure based on a particular flow rate or supply rate of air, or is it on the performance, like the internal conditions, the moisture, and
it was based upon the flow rates, in terms of those are the measurable things. But there were also studies in that process, or as analysis done in that process, looking at indoor air quality, indoor carbon dioxide, etc.
Yeah,
and it quite clearly showed that dwellings with balanced MVHR systems deliver much better indoor air quality than so-called natural ventilation, uncontrolled ventilation strategies.
As in opening a window?
That's in opening a window, yeah. Or having little trickle
natural ventilation. It sounds so good.
I know, it always sounds so benign, doesn't it? But people forget that lion's in natural as well, and they're just presence.
Yeah, nice. And there are lots of studies out there to show that while relying on windows is nice on a pleasant day when there's a gentle breeze and not too much pollen and no traffic noise outside and no burglars around, it doesn't tend to work in the long term to the extent to which you need it to maintain healthy conditions on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty much global. I know there are studies done here in New Zealand that show that, and there are studies from lots of different climates. So is that what sort of flow rates are we talking? Is it a liters per second or cubic meters per hour, or is it a volume per person? How do you know that you're getting adequate fresh air into a home?
Well, UK building regulations works on litres per person per second, but of course that can translate to cubic meters per hour per person. From a passive house perspective, all these units kind of work across. I can't tell you the numbers off the top of my head. I'm not looking at it on a day in day out basis, but basically, what having just been teaching the building services for passive house to newbie passive house designers last week. What we were looking at was how we've got to satisfy both obviously building regulations and passive house requirements if we want to produce certified buildings in the UK.
Yeah. And you mentioned teaching. You're involved with education. You've been helping other people so that they don't have to translate German manuals and decipher building physics by themselves. Yeah. How long have you been involved in teaching passive house?
About 10 years now, so about a decade. So we've gone through a few iterations, and we keep refining processes, and we're going through an interesting process at the moment whereby we're with the big move online, we're streamlining the education process so that we can actually help and support more people more easily. And we're going to be getting that up and online in the near future.
Now, by we, I assume you're talking about the Passive House Trust?
Passive House Training, which we're working with the Passive House Trust.
Right, because you also tell us about LEAP. When did LEAP start, and what is it for those that haven't come across it before?
Okay, LEAP is my architectural practice. I developed over about 10 years ago. Basically, it's a lovingly engineered architectural practice. So
hence LEAP. Nice.
Yeah. So it incorporates both the engineering and the architecture and all that care into the name.
Yeah.
I've been designing passive house buildings through my practice over that period. That's what the practice focuses on. I'm also, I'm a technical advisor to the Passive House Trust, as well as a technical advisor to the AECB, which is the Association for Environment Conscious Building, of which I'm also a trustee. So I've got to wear a number of different hats, including also the RIBA Northeast Sustainable Futures co-chair. So we're helping to get more architects involved and interested in sustainable construction, sustainable design.
Does the AECB have input into the general building regulations, or is it sort of an advocacy lobbying type group?
The AECB is a members group with that provides lobby. It does lobby. It's got ways into speaking to the government, different departments and the likes. But it's a members organisation where we offer mutual support to one another and help each other with projects. And the AECB does that in part by running a number of different standards which are complementary to Passive House.
Yeah. It's interesting. The number of people that get involved with Passive House end up wearing a number of hats because they've got to have their day job, but then also get involved in trying to influence the market and also educate others as well. And you're a great example of doing that and being a leader in that industry.
Okay.
Do you do any work other than Passive House?
Not really, no.
Right.
We if we're designing a project that is a retrofit, then it may or may not satisfy, may or may not actually achieve benefit. We come at it from the premise that that's what we're going to try for.
Right.
There's different criteria, of course, for retrofits that we can try to work with. It can, whether we're using a component method or whether we're using the space heating demand as a strategy.
But you've got some EnerPHit examples of where you've gone through the whole process and had them certified.
Yeah. So Shepherd's Barn is a barn conversion, funnily enough, where we've taken that back to as a Passivhaus retrofit, and we've got number of more standard residential projects on the books at the moment. And a lot of the work that I've been doing so far has been predominantly new build related.
Yeah. Any recommendations you'd have for someone embarking on an EnerPHit project?
Learn a lot about moisture.
Right.
I think we can understand how to do passive house and the low energy side of things, but understanding high growth thermal performance, particularly when you're dealing with masonry buildings, is a very important thing.
Yeah, and are you often dealing with heritage issues?
I am bumping into some of those issues as we go. Yes, working on one of the projects I'm looking at has a non-designated heritage asset, so it's not quite listed, should we say? It's on the cusp of having historic importance to it. So you've got to still treat it with a lot of due care, as much as you'd need to treat any building with some sort of care and compassion, shall we say?
But might that mean that you would not be able to put external insulation on, for example?
Yes, we're not talking about external insulation. Internal insulation would be the approach that we're considering now, using an insulating lime plaster rather than and being cautious about how much we insulate. So we wouldn't insulate to the same degree as we might otherwise, because that can introduce moisture risks into the construction of a masonry building.
Right, interesting. That which is why you need to consider hygrothermal analysis. So do you use tools like Woofy to do modelling on those envelopes?
Tools like Woofy can be used. Delphin and others. It's not, should we say, it's not something that we're doing in house at the moment.
Right.
I did learn how to use the software, but I just didn't end up doing enough of it to justify the fee.
Yeah, and that can be quite a good strategy, because it is quite a specialist skill to say to someone, as an architect, say, hey, can you go model this construction for me, and we'll see if it works or not, rather than you spend hours trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also, when you start to get into these dynamic modeling tools, you start to find that there's the real rabbit holes in terms of some very small subtle variables can throw the calculations out.
Yep.
And unless you're dealing with actual you're doing laboratory analysis of your particular bricks, stone, whatever, then the mortars, then you'll get you could easily get the wrong results. Right. It becomes quite a minefield, and I think that it strangely brings you out all the way as you go through it all. You come out. I'm kind of, the way I'm looking at it at the moment is that it's basically scenario analysis, and you're just trying to develop using dynamic analysis to help inform, again, have a more informed heuristic about where things can be. Yeah, because the science is accurate enough, but getting all the right data is tricky. Yeah. So we still end up in that realm of unknowns. So I think it's more important to use that level of research, look for parametric studies that have been done, and use that to inform decision making.
I guess that on a 200, 300, 400-year-old barn, you can't go and ask the manufacturer for their product data sheets.
No, there aren't. No, but I mean, on the barn conversion at Shepherd's Barn, Paul was finding stone in the fields that had come off perhaps Hadrian's Wall or something like that, and that's now included in the barn again.
Awesome.
So a lot of found material in that project. Really reduced waste.
So, how long did it take for LEAP to become pretty much a Passivhaus exclusive practice? Is that how you set it up in the first place, or did you have to do some some sort of regular architecture work to start with?
There were a few times where it got a bit close to doing regular work, but somehow I've always managed to avoid it. Always managed to keep going on Passivhaus, and perhaps I've also worked on some AECB building standard projects, which are using the same quality assurance methodologies as Passivhaus, but just not setting some of the low energy ratchets quite so tight. So that's it's always had a that level of quality assurance that underpins it. That's what I can't do anything else. I'd feel like I'd be doing anything. I'd be unethical if I was to compromise the approach that I take because this is going to be building regulations. No, there's one way to do it. And we may or may not put quite as much insulation on, but we always detail it to the same way as we would for a passive house. We take account of all the details, the thermal bridges and the likes, the same as you would for a passive house.
Do you turn clients away?
I have, yes.
If they're not interested in going down that path?
If people don't recognise the value that the practice has to offer, we're not going to be a good fit. It's I'm not there to be disingenuous to anybody. I want to work with people that are interested in working on these kinds of things and where we can have a good relationship. And we've got to be coming from the same kind of place to be able to do that.
Yeah. You've done a lot of really interesting work, and that you've some of it which you published. You made stuff available. Where's some tips for people where they can go to get some of the work that you've done, some of the papers you've written, or some of the content that you've created?
Yeah, well, the best place that I point people towards is a website that I've got called passivhoussecrets.co.uk. It's got a number of different videos on there, and which I'm adding to. There's a new video that's going to be released soon about Shepherd's Barn, and through that, people can get access to different documentaries and other technical information.
We'll put a link up there. It's Passivhaus with HUS.
Yep, spelled in the German form.
The German passivhoussecrets.co.uk. That's awesome. And I'm sure people will come across your name if they search up some other research and white papers and things that you've authored over the time. Some fantastic.
Mark Siddall, SIDD, and people find articles and things about that if they put my name in Passivhaus spelt in German, because that's the way we do it in the UK.
And of course, you got some great case studies and research on your LEAP website as well, which we'll also put a link up. That's leap4 the number 4 .it.
Yeah, when I was being clever, it was leap for it,
right?
Because it's an Italian website, hence the IT.
I see.
So.
All right. Just to finish off with, where do you see things going? Where do you see the building industry in the UK in the next, say, 3 and then maybe the next 5 years? Because I'd have to say, making in that part of the world, making some pretty good, at least statements and indications now about the way you'd like things to go, particularly around carbon.
I think, I can't really speak from an industry perspective. I can speak from where I see Passivhaus going in the next few years, which is getting stronger, moving into larger projects, dealing with larger, more complex building typologies. So that whole over of kind of different buildings being added to, and I think it's going from strength to strength. I think it's a really interesting and exciting time, and having been working on Passivhaus buildings across the UK for a number of years, what's exciting to me is that the northeast of England, where I'm based, is really paying more attention to it as well. So we're not only I'm seeing more clients, but I'm also seeing more certified Passivhaus designers coming into the northeast. I'm helping to train them. I've got that fortunate thing to do, but it's great to see this happen, some momentum taking place.
Yeah.
Should we say, I don't really perceive that there's competition between passive house designers. I think the competition is between us and them, as in the rest of the industry. And the more passive house designers there are, all ships will rise with a rising tide is the little mantra that goes through my mind's eye.
Nice. Awesome. Hey, well, thank you for all your work, Mark. I really, it's been great. I first chatted quite a number of years ago, but it's been awesome to see your name keep popping up with the work that you've been doing, not just out of your practice, but that research and the stuff that you publish and put out there. Will people find you in Germany later this year?
You'll find me online. I'm not going to be going there physically. There's just one too many issues with travel at the moment.
Yes.
It keeps messing things up. That's life.
Yeah.
But I think that with Larch Corner having won the UK Passive House Awards, I'm going to be doing. I've got a paper in about that.
Yep.
About that project, because it's also the third most airtight home in the world, as far as we can. So the air leakage would fit on the square of a 1 penny coin.
Wow.
So that's that's one of the things it's achieved. And I've also
that's a good reason for people to come along, even if they get along virtually to the International Passive House Conference.
Yeah, well, the at passivhousesecrets.co.uk, we've got the video about the project, and I'm also going to be running a webinar in early September on the project. So everyone's that listens to this can come along, and awesome. If you're listening to this after the event, then still come along to Passive House Secrets. There's no charges, no fees. It's not a money-making website. And there'll be an opportunity to watch the recap of the webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. Great to have you on the show and to talk to you again, and keep up all the good work.
Very good. Thank you very much. Great to speak to you, Matthew, and keep well.
Awesome. And that was Mark Siddall of Leap Engineering. As I said, it's a lovingly engineered architectural process. Great leader in the space of Passive House in the UK. What did you think of that one, Zack?
Well, I'm impressed by the intentionality that he brings to his work. That 10 years ago, he set out to do all Passive House and if not Passive House, then essentially the same sort of quality assurance with maybe slightly different targets, but really high performance buildings with real attention to quality and craft, and he's been doing that for 10 years. So when people we have the pleasure of interviewing folks on this podcast who have made that leap, so to speak.
Yeah.
and they're making it happen, and that is really good and inspiring. So
yeah, Mark's one of those people that his name pops up because of his time in the industry, that he has been such a leader, and he's been I've seen his name pop up on conference programs for quite some time, but he also, like a lot of architects in this space, just shares so much knowledge and information. He's done a lot of his own research. He publishes a lot of material, does posts, and just makes stuff available, which is he's quite into looking at the facts and the research and the data, which can be really helpful for people. So you can find some of those resources at his website, and encourage people to go and check that out.
I followed him for years on Twitter as well. And he shares his insights and links to resources and things there as well. So it's a good place to check him out. I enjoyed the conversation about natural ventilation versus mechanical ventilation, and his quote. I'm going to totally want to steal this. that people forget that lions are natural too.
Yeah.
And so, man, natural ventilation sure has come to bite us here in our old house in Seattle. With these wildfires, and it's clear that there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
On that,
it's so true.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest barriers that come up. One of the biggest questions that come up really early on in the conversations you have with people when you first introduce them to Passivhaus.
And I was just speaking with Beverly Craig, who is at Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. She's been one of the people. She's been on many programs at the accelerator, summits, and she's very active in the showcase, the happy hour and showcases and stuff. And she's been a pivotal figure in policymaking in Massachusetts that's behind this explosion of multifamily passive house projects that are happening now in Massachusetts. It's going to be the topic of the showcases coming up next week. And she has data about the cost of these new buildings, these new multifamily buildings, the cost delta, the incremental cost increase of passive house compared to conventional buildings built to the current code. And her numbers show that it's like 1.5% to 2.5%, which is very small, within the contingency budgets of these construction projects. But she goes on to point out that the cause of that extra cost is bringing fresh air to bedrooms. So it's exactly the act of making our buildings healthy costs a little bit of money, but is absolutely worth it. This is not, so this is not about, it's not first and foremost about paying more for energy efficiency anymore when it comes to dealing with things like COVID or wildfire smoke. It's simply creating places that are safe for us to inhabit when we're in our buildings.
Yeah. So it's not easy to do a comparison because you're not comparing apples to apples. You're not comparing like to like. And if someone says, well, what's the payback on that? You start talking in kind of semantics about, well, what's the payback on your health?
Right.
Because it's not, like you say, it's not a question of, if I invest this, it's going to be energy efficient and therefore, it's going to pay for itself within whatever years in terms of energy use. It's going to pay for itself in terms of you having a healthy lifestyle and not getting sick.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think it kind of short circuits that whole, what's the payback? It's more like, which do you want? Unhealthy living conditions or healthy living conditions? So it's an interesting, we're at this interesting moment where I want to share also this article that I just saw come across my desk. It's from Carbon Tracker, the Carbon Tracker Initiative. So that's carbontracker.org. It's a great organization that publishes studies and opinion pieces around the clean energy transition. And this piece is called "Gain, Not Pain: Why COP." So the climate action coming together of governments that's about to happen in Glasgow. Why COP must move the narrative forward, and it's making the argument that the world has changed a lot since the Paris Accord, and so therefore the logic of climate mitigation needs to change. So the old way of thinking was that climate action, like clean energy transition, is going to be super expensive, and so we have to share the burden. We need to figure out how to do that. And we're at a place where actually clean energy is cheaper than fossil fuels. So there's a tremendous opportunity in the clean energy transition. We've got vested interests who are trying to slow that down, but the economic fundamentals have shifted. And so I think that's true too for buildings. We're getting to that place where we're getting closer and closer. In some cases, I've already reached cost parity with conventional construction. It depends on where you are, and kind of where the industry is. So we're getting to that place where it's about gain, not pain, when we're proposing passive house as opposed to conventional construction. Plus, we all are super aware now of the quality of our air and how indoor air can be dangerous if it's not engineered correctly and filtered. And so it's it feels like we're that crossover point of these two trends feels like an inflection point.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to Mark and Leap, the other thing that I think is really important is his work in retrofits. And he's got a whole range of projects and in his portfolio there. You can have a look at his case studies and some successfully finished low energy retrofits in particular of different styles. And this is really important work because it's all well and good designing and building new houses to Passive House, but we need to figure out how to make our existing housing stock better without bulldozing them and starting again. And Mark's doing more and more of that, which is really exciting to see. So check out those resources. I
loved your question about what advice does he have for people who are thinking about doing an interfit. And he said, learn a lot about moisture. It's all about hydrothermal analysis and understanding how you're impacting these existing structures, especially in masonry walls. We stick an insulation onto a wall that didn't have it before is a good thing to do, but does have implications around moisture as well when you're introducing that thermal gradient there that wasn't there before. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, lots of really good stuff there. Check it out, Mark's website and all the great resources. Leap for it, which is LEAP, the number 4.it. Bit of a clever URL there, but you can also search him up. You'll probably find him on various social media channels as well. All right. What have we got going on around the place, Zach?
Well, September is completely bonkers when it comes to Passive House. I mean, there's so much happening. So at the Accelerator this week, on Tuesday, so Wednesday your time, Passive House Accelerator Construction Tech will feature Norm Horn of Invinity and Gary Mosier of the Mosier Studio. And they're going to be presenting about the Pennsylvania Wilds interfit retrofit of this rural sustainable development headquarters. Really cool building, and I just saw the run through of the presentation yesterday, and it's really well done. So join us for that. Then on Wednesday, so Thursday your time, we'll have the Global Passive House Showcase. This is formerly known as the Happy Hour, and that will be about the Massachusetts Passive House boom, and specifically a project called the Harbor Village Affordable Housing Project. The speakers will include Michelle Pigian, who is a leading Passivhaus architect in Boston from Icon Architecture, as well as Beverly Craig, who I was talking about before from Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. Beverly will be presenting and also will be playing the role of guest host. Then, real quick, we've got 4 upcoming conferences. We're actually, when this airs, we'll be in the middle of the International Passive House Conference that's online only, being presented by Passive House Institute. Then on September 16th through 18th, Passive House Maine will hold its fall forum. Then on September 22nd through 23rd, Passive House Canada will hold its Tower Retrofit Symposium. And Passive House Accelerator is collaborating with Passive House Canada to do a social event at the end of the first day. And FIAS then on October 12th through 15th will hold its flagship conference, and it's now been rebranded. It's now called FIASCon. And finally, November 25th through 27th, the South Pacific Passive House Conference will happen, assuming that COVID is cooperating. Oh, and last but not least, we have Mark Siddall joining us in October for the Global Passive House Showcase. On October 20th, Mark will be presenting his Larch Corner project, which won a big award from the Passive House Trust recently. We're really excited to see and learn more about this cool project. So please join us on October 20th, and that will actually happen at the earlier time. So once a month at the showcase, we are doing a UK/Europe friendly time slot. So we are actually doing the showcase 5 hours earlier than the normally scheduled time. This once a month special episode. So on October 20th, will present Mark's work at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. London, and 8 p.m. Central European Standard Time. So lots coming up, and we'll have links to all this in the show notes.
Speaking of rebranding, the Passivhaus Network, I like it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, me too. Right.
Yeah.
Formerly known as North American Passivhaus Network. Now it's the Passivhaus Network, and they have a new groovy logo too.
Yeah, good refresh, and I think they've updated some of their strategy and some of the great work that they do as well. So really good stuff to see. And also, if you want a precursor to Norm Horn, don't forget that we interviewed him, episode 48. You can check that out at the Accelerator as well if you want to have a bit of a prelude to that session coming up.
Indeed.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thank you for all that, Zack. And like I said, welcome back. It's great to be back into season 2. Thank you to our awesome sponsors, and thank you to everyone who listens and contributes to the show. We really appreciate it. And you can always send us a message via the Accelerator, or you can email us podcast at passivhausaccelerator.com. Well, that's it for this week. We'll be back again next week with another great interview. So take care, and thank you for listening in.